Thank you. I'm going to try to keep this moving at a fair clip. While we don't want to dwell on the past, we should at least know how it formed where we are and how that shapes what's possible. If you don't know me, as Andrew said, I'm Michael Tamblyn. I'm CEO of Rakuten Kobo. We are the other ebook retailer, the resistance, the one that is generally focused on keeping booksellers in the ebook game. It's always weird coming to the US because I get a lot of, why don't we see more of you here in the United States? Which is kind of like asking hobbits why they don't take more vacations in Mordor. And that's the smart-ass answer, but there are even better answers, and we're going to talk about those in a second. Our business is about 1/3 in Asia, about 1/3 in Americas North and South, 1/3 in Europe, almost none of it in the US and the UK, for reasons that we'll talk about. We're the second largest manufacturer of e-readers in the world, and somewhere up there in terms of total content sales to trade as well. And that's really the last I'll talk about who we are, except that it helps to ground some of what I'm going to be talking about in the next sort of 18 minutes in terms of real data and things that we've experienced, real experiences that we've had and lived through along the way. When I stood on this stage, not this stage, but a stage not too far from here in 2010 for Books and Browsers, or at Tools and Change thereafter on the handy Gartner hype cycle, we were probably somewhere here or maybe here, and so if you can picture yourself, it's 2010, 2011, 2012. Obama's in the White House. We're clawing our way out of the great financial crisis, and we are, the people in this room, going to transition 50% of the print market to digital, or at least kind of that was the plan. That's where the trade book market was going, which seemed totally doable considering what we'd seen happen in the music business or in video, and it was going to have lots of different kinds of people involved. There were going to be 1,000 startups working on this. Indies are going to be involved, and chains as well as e-commerce players, the Amazons, the Apples, the Googles, and we were certainly going to leave behind the static nature of EPUB 2. We were going to move into EPUB 3 and interactivity. There were going to be books and browsers. There were going to be books as apps. It was going to be infinitely archivable, infinitely searchable. It was all going to be coming not just through kind of regular a la carte sales. It was also going to be on subscriptions and tokens and open access models and libraries and curated book clubs. And there wouldn't just be these sort of single pillars of content. They would be hyperlinked and connected, and of course they would be DRM free. And so here we are in 2022, and depending on how how you look at the world, maybe we're here, or maybe we're here, or maybe we're even kind of up here. And it kind of it depends both on your sense of optimism. It depends on how much your heart was broken back in 2010 or 2012, and probably your general overall state of mind. Ebook adoption, depending on how you slice it, is probably sitting around 20% of trade, but it's really lumpy in the sense that it's probably closer to that magic 50% when we're looking at romance, science fiction, fantasy. It's definitely concentrated in adult fiction and nonfiction, along with YA crossover titles. And so, let's be clear, that's not nothing. But what is sitting resolutely in print, kids' books. There's very little sort of read-along activity that is, there's some of that that's happening in libraries, but all of the rest of that kind of interactive stuff that we were expecting to see has mostly not shown up, along with the cookbooks, anything with great pictures, almost anything illustrated, except for manga. We'll talk about that in a sec. not much interactivity, not many books as apps. The educational publishing business, one of the kind of major powerhouses of the whole show, has retreated behind these very custom-built sort of paywalls of their own. So if newspapers, magazines have either kind of ad-powered themselves into clickbait or paywalls, or become a menu item inside Apple News, and there's still, so it's not quite the future books that we were looking for, and we're not necessarily seeing books of the future, and there's still plenty of DRM. Unless, of course, you're a Macmillan science fiction title or in the public domain. But it kind of wasn't the books of the future that we were looking for. Really, they're just books, and mostly black and white. But there are a lot of them, and a lot of titles that are coming from places that are not traditional publishers. So, what happened? And it's super easy to just drop a company name into here to say it's Amazon or it's Apple or it's Google or it's the publishers or it's the DOJ. But when Peter asked me to put this talk together, it was a cool exercise to go back and look at, why didn't we get X? And go back to root causes. And having been a participant sometimes in making our own decisions as a company, sometimes contributing, sometimes riding a trend, sometimes getting rolled over by a trend, it was interesting to look back and go, okay, so why did things end up there? So think of this as a personal but probably pretty accurate kind of summary of what we've seen. Don't get me wrong, we have a pretty great business, and it's lots of fun, and we get to work with publishers and self-published authors and all kinds of great people in the space. But it doesn't look anything like even we thought we did, and it certainly didn't look like what we were talking about when we were raising money. And I think if you asked Amazon or Apple or Google, they would feel the same way. And if you asked any of the 100 startups who started at the same time that we did, mostly you wouldn't hear anything at all because they're gone. And so I kind of got it down to about 6 turning points that we saw, 6 things where it got us to where we are today in the trade ebook business. They are $9.99 e-ink, author enclosure, 30% pricing power, beautiful objects in the gift economy. Done. Okay. Questions? No. And that's what happened yesterday that got us to today. I'm going to break it down a bit. There are also some very good lessons that kind of apply to any company that we can call out along the way. But let's get into it. And this is not like conspiracy theory stuff. This is, except for a couple of really well-documented spots that actually were conspiracies that were investigated and documented. This is mostly just companies kind of making their own decisions. And in the course of doing that, shaping an industry often in ways that even they didn't anticipate. And so we'll talk a bit about that, but we'll also spend a little bit of time at the end talking about maybe how this isn't the end of the ebook story. And so let's get going. Number 1, $9.99. The price point that paid for summer houses and private schools for 100 anti-competition lawyers. 2007, Amazon launches Kindle and the $9.99 ebook bestseller. Kindle didn't look awesome in 2007. It was kind of like a beige speak and spell, but it did have this amazing price point that galvanized the ebook market. And it's safe to say that the response from publishers was not measured. And whatever else you want to say about it, and people have said a lot, things like anti-competitive, predatory, devaluing, loss leader. It was the jumpstart that got a lot of people buying e-readers. It's the thing that got a lot of people buying ebooks for the first time. And there had been e-readers before, there had been e-bookstores before, but the thing that got consumers excited about the idea of buying a book in a digital format was that instead of buying a $25 hardcover, they were buying $9.99 in digital. And that was kind of the catalyst that got things going. Publishers didn't react to that well, not because, interestingly, they weren't making money. They were actually making it like bandits. They were getting 50% off of a list price that might be $25, so they were getting paid $12 or $13 or $15 for a book that might be $9.99 on sale. So, if you're a publisher, that's awesome. What they were worried about was that if it went on too long, it would both torch the print business, and you end up with one retailer who's potentially dominating the whole market, who might come back around later and say, you know what, we would like these prices to change and we'd like you to pay for them. So what they needed was some competition. Fortunately, Apple was starting to work on the iPad, and they had big plans for ebooks. Publishers were thrilled because if anybody could beat Amazon, it was going to be Apple, and so the table was set for actual publishers getting together around a table to try to find a way out of $9.99. That's been well documented by the Department of Justice, including some really nice restaurant visits in New York. So you can actually read those summaries, and it's kind of like reading TripAdvisor. Like there's some really good restaurant picks that you can find in there. So you can consult the court records for that. But clever lawyers who were working for Apple and for the publishers got the idea of coming together and figuring out in a variety of ways how can we make prices better. That led to agency. Publishers set the price. They won't be $9.99 anymore. Prices will still be cheap, but they will be higher than they were. And while the publishers are lower, the prices are lower, publishers do make more. And most importantly, they get to set that price. They get 70%, Apple gets 30%. The 30% is important because it's the same 30% that Apple charges for any App Store transaction. And that also became the standard that every publisher gave to every retailer, regardless of where those books were being sold. That's going to become important later. So, Department of Justice decided that they don't like competing publishers and a retailer getting together to get innovative on business models. And so the whole thing gets investigated, and there's a trial, and there are settlements and verdicts, all of which say something like, we're going to let you keep setting prices, but we're going to allow a little bit of discounting, and we're going to take the caps off. And so then we get back to agency, and so that's kind of where we are today in terms of pricing. Why is this such a big deal? On the positive side, $9.99 jump-started a market and gave a lot of people to pick up ebooks in the first place. Agency did keep Amazon from loss leadering everyone to death. But the publisher freak out, the investigations, the lawyers, the armies of litigators marching up and down Broadway and Avenue of the Americas kind of froze the industry in place for a couple of years. Retailers were still building businesses, but publishers were hunkered down with legal teams and analysts and not doing much in terms of innovation in the industry. And it kind of locked the market share in place in the US and the UK, which is where all of this took place. So, so we have the industry on pause for a couple of years. We have lots of lawyers. The pricing power shifts from retailers to publishers, and market share kind of gets frozen. Okay, so what? It was also startup extinction event number one. It was for a whole bunch of startups who were in this space. First, it's really hard to raise money if you're trying to start out as a startup and you sit down with a VC and they say, okay, so how much do you make off of each book that you sell? And you say, well, funny you should mention that. We actually lose $3 on each book we sell. It's a short conversation. I don't know why. But let's say you survived that, and some did, you would still, what agency required was direct connection with a publisher, a huge amount of taxation and remittance infrastructure that most small companies and startup companies didn't have. And it pretty much broke anyone who was getting their ebooks from an aggregator as opposed to getting them directly. So anyone that was being powered by Ingram, anyone that was being powered by any of the other aggregators couldn't get books and got turned off. So for kind of anywhere between 3, 6, 9 critical months, anyone who didn't have direct lines of supply was out of the business. And that took a lot of people out. So So what if that hadn't happened? What would the ebook world look like? And what's interesting is we don't have to guess because we have a real live counterfactual floating around out there, which is Europe. Thanks to some very handy laws that were put in place to protect print book businesses, places like France, Germany, Netherlands, Spain, Italy, you can't do much discounting. You can't change the prices of books. All books get sold at the same price. And that made Europe way more competitive from a retail perspective than the US or the UK. And so today, in just about every market, there is at least one major retailer who's going toe-to-toe with Amazon in market share for ebooks. Fnac in France, Tolino Alliance in Germany, Mondadori and Teltrelli in Italy, Bol.com in the Netherlands, still very focused on e-readers, but with different people and different companies involved as opposed to there just being one. That's the good news. On the other hand, digital adoption, much lower. France, maybe 8%, Germany somewhere around 15%. They're all growing, but growing more slowly. And that's because they never had that $9.99 rocket fuel. Now, from a pacing perspective, you and possibly our organizers might be thinking, oh my God, we're like 15 minutes in and we've just finished item number 1. Don't worry, because it now starts to speed up. Okay. Other reason we didn't get the books of the future, e-ink. Listen, the e-ink as seen on your Kobo, Kindle, or other e-reader variant can't do a lot of things that we wanted from our books of the future. Interactivity is really tough, video is really tough, no animation, sound on Bluetooth only very recently, and color is just starting to be a thing. And don't get me wrong, as somebody in the e-reader selling business, e-ink is awesome. It's low power, there are no distractions, it's easy on the eyes, you know, I could go on and have. And it's just a thing if you want to read adult fiction, YA fiction, nonfiction, and I can say with a high degree of confidence that every book reading mom or grandmother over the age of 45 was given an e-reader in the holiday season between 2010 and 2012. I know because they called us all for technical support on like December 26th. They're durable, they have an incredibly long, slow upgrade cycle, they last a long time, and that means even when color e-ink does show up, the install base of black and white is going to be with us for a long, long time. And that means that most of the customers, and most of the customers who are buying 2 books a week, most of the ones who are commercially important, are being served through a black and white device today and will continue to be so for years to come. And so when the iPad arrived, this was supposed to kind of undo all of this. We were going to get to that level of interactivity and color and animation and embedded video and everything else that we wanted. E-readers were going to be the black and white TVs of ebooks. And yet, you know, somehow that didn't happen. If you look around today in the US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, the majority of books are still being sold on e-ink devices. That shapes where publishers invest in content production and what kinds of ebooks have been getting made for most of the last 10 years. There's an alternate universe in which that didn't happen, where e-ink doesn't become dominant and where we can see a world without e-ink, and that is Japan. Japan has no e-readers. I know because I've tried to sell them there. And even though Sony was a pioneer in the space, everything is read on phones and through apps. Japan's one of our largest territories. All of our sales happen through smartphones, not even through tablets. Almost all of it is manga, and none of it is happening on e-readers. Publishers still have pricing power to a large degree. They also run their own apps, run their own stores, hold back titles exclusively for themselves. So you have a dozen publishers all fighting it out for market share, along with Kobo, Amazon, Apple, Google, other retailers, subscription, webtoons, freemium webtoons, coin-based models, like you name it. No player is dominant. It is glorious chaos over there. And this is kind of what publishers were hoping for when they tried to do their deals with Apple, but it didn't really happen. And sadly, that comes back to our Apple 30%. The Faustian deal that was struck was, we're going to get you out of this $9.99 problem, we're going to move to this new model. It also meant that the 30% that publishers were offering up is the same as what Apple charges for everything that gets sold in the App Store. which is important because if you want to sell an ebook in the App Store and all of the margin is 30%, then effectively you can't sell an ebook in the App Store. And that has essentially meant that anyone who wanted to use Apple as a platform for ebook sales has been shoved out of that market. And that was even before Apple said to everyone, the only way that you can do this is by going through our payment system. That led to startup extinction event number 2. Anyone who was running an app, anyone who was trying to kind of go through that space, make use of that platform, got shoved out. And so we kind of ended up with this desert where the platform that was most capable of interactivity, of creativity, of interplay of media, could never be that platform because there was really only one way through it and one retailer who was doing it. And so that threw everybody else out of the pool. It also made all of us double down on making sure that we could run our own ecosystems, run our own hardware, and kind of protect ourselves from ecosystem risk in other places. So we went author enclosure. Self-publishing has been kind of the most interesting disruptor force in ebooks generally, whether it's KDP, Kobo Writing Life, Smashwords, Draft Digital. That's kind of where the engine for innovation in ebooks could have happened, except because of that installed base of e-ink, all of that energy and all of that focus, ends up in black and white static EPUB, and the creativity that could have been harnessed off of that base has all been kind of flowing into that one channel and that one set of devices. The good news is that self-published authors kind of represent the only digital creator class that has a middle class. If you look at everything from YouTube, TikTok, Spotify, just about any other class of creators, it's an all or nothing equation. You're making $1 million, you're making $0. There are thousands and thousands of self-published authors who are making $50,000 a year, $60,000 a year, who are actually making a living in a transactional environment in a digital good. It, as far as I know, does not happen anywhere else in the digital creator space. So although we fight about exclusivity, being enclosed within a certain platform or going wide and selling everywhere, we've been able to kind of create a creator class that actually is like making a living, which is fantastic. So pricing power, publishers got their hands on pricing, did not necessarily behave well. Books got a lot more expensive, have kept getting more expensive. Most of this was about trying to preserve bookstores, which is fun because we love bookstores, but it did mean that we ended up with a very different market between fiction and nonfiction. As ebooks went digital, it went genre fiction first, romance, science fiction, fantasy, mystery, and so on. Publishers took advantage of pricing power to generally make nonfiction more expensive, especially in front list. A lot of that was about preserving a category for bricks and mortar booksellers so that they could continue to survive, and that's okay. It did, however, make a great opportunity for self-publishing. And if you look at where self-publishing really started to climb, it was right around the same time that publishers were starting to ratchet up prices. So they created a window that the self-publishing world flooded into between 99 cents and $4.99. And that's really where all of that market share has been created. So the stat that you heard before, 1 in 4 books that we sell is coming from a self-published author, absolutely true. And almost all of it is happening within a price band that's sort of less than $5. Fascinating. And the last thing was that it turned out that as much as we love digital and as much as people love reading ebooks, people really like giving books as gifts. And parents like giving books to children. Parents like seeing children surrounded by books. We love having beautiful books ourselves. And if we looked at our initial assumption, which was we were going to flip 50% of of trade book volume from print to digital, I think we all underestimated how much of that is tied up in the gift economy. How much is parents giving gifts to children? How much of it is us giving books to our friends? And a lot of that is tied up in what I'd call the beautiful nonfiction market. And publishers, to their credit, as they were coming under pressure from ebooks, stepped up, started making books more beautiful, started making design better, started making bindings and photography and internal design better. And that's never a bad thing. There were some others. We can talk about the Google Books lawsuit. We can talk about educational publishers. But those were the 6 that really seem to kind of shift us into the space that we're in right now. There are, if I can indulge you 1 minute, I know, 2 things that could actually really shake this thing up again. The first is really simple. Someone, FTC, Lena Khan, Marguerite Vestager in Brussels, could say, you know what, Apple, you don't get to charge 30% for goods that you're also selling yourself. This is an active investigation on today, so this isn't kind of a pie in the sky sort of theoretical possibility. This is a legislative remedy that's being actively contemplated right now. If you suddenly were paying Apple 5% instead of 30%, that opens up a whole platform back to retail again that previously did not exist. And that's kind of a fascinating thing to contemplate. The other is on the Amazon side. So they're also facing their own investigations. Amazon runs a company town full of self-published authors. So dream with me a little bit. A regulator says, you know what, you can own the store, you can be in payments, you can do ad sales, you can run the servers, but you don't get to own the factory and the workers too. And specifically, you can't have a chokehold on independent authors, audiobooks, book rights, translation rights, and your own publishers, and keep them all in a private pool for yourself. So imagine that. All the self-published authors, all the audiobook rights inside Audible, all the Thomas and Mercer and all of the other ones, get all of the indie comic books that are sitting inside Comixology, all of a sudden get spun out into a standalone publisher aggregator that's now negotiating with Amazon Prime for placement, is negotiating terms with other authors for Kindle Unlimited, and now selling to other retailers. And tell me if that doesn't change the dynamic with publishers. A company that is 100% author-focused, expert in online platforms, digital only, and probably somewhere between the top 2 and top 3 in terms of size for publishers in America. And with everything to gain and nothing to lose from growing the digital market. It's crazy, but it's not crazy. So it doesn't change the nature of e-ink. It doesn't change a lot of the other factors that we've got here, but having platforms that we could sell into and having authors unlocked from platforms as well could change the whole market again. So thanks so much. 6 things, 2 options. Thanks for having me. 5 minutes over.